Every legend has a beginning small enough to seem unremarkable at the time. Christian von Koenigsegg begins at 5 years old, watching a stop-motion film about a bicycle repairman who builds his own racing car and wins against impossible odds. That quiet Norwegian story about persistence and homemade ambition planted something in him that never went away. Most children forget a movie like that within a week. Christian carried it with him for the rest of his life, and even decades later, describing the go-kart ride he took at 6, he called it one of the best days of his life, a small detail that shows just how early his relationship with machines and speed had taken root. By his teenage years, that fascination had turned hands-on. He was known around town as the kid who could tune a moped better than anyone else, who took apart toasters and video recorders simply to understand how they worked, the early shape of a mind that would spend decades refusing to accept that something couldn't be made better. Before cars, there was an idea about flooring. At 19, Christian invented a simple clicking mechanism to join floorboards together without nails or adhesive and presented it to his father-in-law, who ran a flooring factory in Belgium. The idea was rejected outright. Surely, he was told, if this worked, someone would have invented it already. Within a few years, other companies patented strikingly similar designs, and that concept grew into a multi-billion-dollar global flooring industry. Christian had been right. He simply hadn't been believed yet, a pattern that would repeat itself on a far larger scale. For Christian, that sting became fuel. Rather than chase another idea simply because it might succeed, he made a decision that looked, on paper, far less rational. He decided to build his dream car instead, a fully realized sports car designed and engineered from nothing, in a country that had never produced anything like it. It's worth noting the environment he grew up in, because it shows how unlikely this story really is. Raised in Stockholm, educated in Dandrid and later in Brussels, where he studied economics, nothing in Christian's path pointed toward automotive engineering. He had no formal training in chassis design, aerodynamics, or powertrain development. What he had instead was decades of self-taught curiosity, a habit of dismantling machines just to understand them, and a refusal to accept that something was impossible simply because no one in his country had tried it before. Sweden's reputation in the industry was built on safety and reliability, not exotic performance engineering, and a 22-year-old founding a hypercar company out of a small workshop, with no major manufacturer behind him and no formal training, struck most observers as somewhere between naive and absurd. He was laughed at, by his own account, by people who simply couldn't picture the outcome he was already imagining clearly in his own mind. It would have been easy to quietly fold the idea and return to something safer. But the same stubbornness that carried Christian through the flooring invention carried him into the next chapter of his life, one that would take years of invisible, unglamorous work before the world ever noticed. Belief alone doesn't build a hypercar. In 1994, Christian launched what he called the Koenigsegg project, financed through money from earlier ventures and a $200,000 contribution from a Swedish technical development board, far from enough to build a competitive performance vehicle from scratch. His father saw something worth investing in, stepping in as an early backer and helping finance the operation for more than 3 years while the team worked towards something the industry assumed would never materialize. Working alongside designer David Crafford, Christian translated his own sketches into a design concept, and from that came the first prototype. Progress was slow and largely invisible to the outside world, just a small team in Sweden working toward a goal almost nobody believed was achievable. The operation grew slightly less lonely in 2000 when Halldora Koenigsegg joined as chief operating officer, managing the practical realities of running a company on a fraction of the resources available to established manufacturers and helping turn the project into something resembling a sustainable business. That same year, Christian unveiled the all-new Koenigsegg CC8S at the Paris Motor Show, stunning an industry that had assumed the project would quietly disappear. 2 years later, the first customer car was delivered to a buyer in Switzerland, proof this was an actual functioning manufacturer. Was anyone still laughing? Some were, but the laughter was getting quieter. Then, in 2005, just 3 years after that first delivery, Koenigsegg broke the production car top speed record, long held by McLaren, one of the most respected names in performance engineering. McLaren had spent decades building one of motorsport's most recognizable names, backed by resources a small Swedish startup couldn't begin to match. And yet here was Koenigsegg, barely 10 years removed from a single sketch and a rejected flooring patent, taking that exact record for itself. For the first time, conversations about Koenigsegg stopped treating the company as a curiosity and started treating it as a genuine contender. Innovations followed steadily: the Koenigsegg direct drive system, the light-speed transmission, and composite breakthroughs like the AirCore hollow carbon fiber chassis, each reinforcing that this was a company still pushing, still refining. By the time the broader hypercar world had absorbed what Koenigsegg had accomplished, it was being mentioned in the same breath as Bugatti, McLaren, and Pagani on its own merit, all built from little more than a childhood memory, a rejected patent, and $200,000 of funding. Fast forward to 2022, and Christian von Koenigsegg turned 50. For most people, a milestone birthday like that might mean a trip somewhere far away or a quiet family celebration. For the man who built an entire company out of stubborn belief and a childhood movie, 50 meant something else entirely. It meant building a car. The result was the Koenigsegg CC850, conceived as a tribute to the milestone, deliberately styled with retro cues pulled from the brand's own history, most notably the CC8S that had stunned Paris 2 decades earlier, simultaneously a celebration of where the brand started and a demonstration of how far it had come. The production plan carried its own quiet symbolism: 50 units, one for each year of Christian's life, a detail consistent with a man who has always treated milestones as opportunities to build something tangible rather than simply mark time passing. Demand ended up exceeding even Koenigsegg's own expectations, and the run was expanded to 70 units, a fitting problem for a brand built on underestimating how much the world would want what it was making. Strip away the symbolism, and the CC850 stands on its own as a genuine engineering achievement. At its core sits a 5-liter, twin-turbocharged V8 producing roughly 1,350 horsepower on E85 fuel and around 1,100 horsepower on standard pump gas. Paired with a curb weight of approximately 1,350 kilograms, it achieves a power-to-weight ratio approaching a remarkable 1-to-1, among the most extreme performance figures ever built for the road. Perhaps the most striking decision involves the transmission. Rather than choosing between a traditional manual gearbox and a modern automatic, Koenigsegg's engineers built one that offers both full manual control for drivers who want it and seamless automatic operation for those who don't, another puzzle to crack for a company built on refusing conventional limitations. What truly separates Koenigsegg from almost every other manufacturer at this level is how much of the car is built in-house. With the exception of microchips and the leather in the cabin, nearly every component of the CC850 is produced internally at Koenigsegg's own facility in Sweden, a level of vertical integration few prestige manufacturers attempt. That comes with real costs: slower production, smaller volumes, a far higher price tag, and no outside vendor to blame when something goes wrong. For a small manufacturer competing against far larger budgets, that level of control is either a tremendous advantage or an enormous risk, depending on whether the engineering holds up. At Koenigsegg, it consistently has. The carbon fiber chassis borrows from the platform developed for the Koenigsegg Jesko, yet the finished car prioritizes more than outright speed. Bespoke luggage, a removable Targa-style roof, and an interior built without a single piece of plastic point toward a car designed around experience and craftsmanship as much as raw numbers. The CC850 was never meant to be simply the fastest car Koenigsegg could build. It was meant to be the most complete expression of everything the company had learned to build well. Every detail of the CC850 connects back to one moment: the unveiling of the CC8S in Paris more than 2 decades earlier, the car that first proved Christian von Koenigsegg's vision could survive contact with the real world. The CC850's silhouette deliberately echoes that original shape, along with influences from the CCR that followed it, feeling less like a brand new product and more like a direct continuation of a story that began in a small Swedish workshop. For Christian, building a tribute to his own beginning rather than something purely new is tied to something deeper than nostalgia. This is a man whose entire career has been shaped by proving doubters wrong, by turning a moment of public laughter into one of the world's most respected performance brands. Returning to that original design 2 decades and 1 world record later wasn't a step backward. It was an acknowledgement of how far the company had traveled since that first prototype came together in a workshop nobody outside the team believed in. In many ways, the CC850 closes one loop and opens another. It honors the car that proved Koenigsegg belonged on the same stage as McLaren, Bugatti, and every other legacy hypercar maker, while showing just how much engineering ambition the company still has left. 50 units, expanded to 70, each one a rolling reminder that the boy who watched a stop-motion film about a homemade race car eventually built an entire universe around that same stubborn belief. Most people spend milestone birthdays reflecting on time past. Christian spent his proving that the restless curiosity which built an entire company from nothing hadn't faded with age. The CC850 isn't simply a celebration of 50 years lived. It's a statement that the version of him who refused to accept no at 22 is still very much present at 50, still building, still pushing past whatever anyone else assumes the limits should be. The doubt was gone, replaced by a world record, a respected legacy brand, and a car built almost entirely by his own team's hands.